I'll start right now at this Wyoming Veterans celebration for our Vietnam era. So with that, I will say what happened to me was I was drafted a little bit early while I was still working on my degree in college. And because the university failed to send in my notification that I was still in school, and so they thought I was losing my 2S deferment, and so they drafted me back in 1969. And as a result, when I called them and said, how come I'm being drafted because I still have my 2S deferment, they said, well, no, because they didn't send us one. So then I had the administrative group at the university, at the college, send it to them, and they said, okay, now you're right, you're back to 2S. So then when I went and finished, because I finished my degree, I got my degree in microbiology. I was a certified medical technician and everything else for this. And so then, as soon as I finished, it was before graduation, it was in December, right after that, then they realized I was finished, and they sent me another notification, says, you gotta go to basic training. So when I asked that question, they said, all we did was postpone your date. And I said, oh, great. So anyway, then I did go into the military. I went through all my basic training. And this is one of the things that I do like to talk about as well, is because going through basic training was really a blessing for me. Because in the Army, yes. Fort Lewis, Washington. And I had to do this in January. And so we had to crawl around a lot, and it was in the snow and things like that. So it wasn't really comfortable, but at the same time, it was a very blessing for me. We went through our basic training. There was a whole bunch of us we were all kind of local people that all went at the same time up there to Fort Lewis. And I just really enjoyed, we were the first ones, we were reported as being the first ones that did the M16s from the other, I can't remember the exact caliber, the one with the wooden handle and stuff like the wooden stock and stuff like that. But anyway, we did the M16, and so I learned a lot about it, and I scored the highest in what we were supposed to do for our military things. And I scored higher than everybody else out of that whole group. Because growing up in Green River, Wyoming, I had been hunting all my life. So anyway, then we went through basic training and got a lot of this good experience. And so then what happened was, because I was a certified medical technician, I also, because back then I had glasses. I'd been wearing glasses since I was 8 years old. I had 20/400 vision. And so even though when we were headed for Vietnam, I was rated as being almost non-combat rated, because if I lost my glasses, then they think you're blind. So what I did was, I just said, oh, okay, that's fine. And so once we got done with our basic training and everything, and then we were headed, and I wound up going to Vietnam for just a moment, because over there, what happened is the general, and I don't know his name, I can't remember his name now, in Washington, D.C., he was the general of the 6th Army, and the 6th Army Medical Headquarters was in a big problem at that time. But anyway, as soon as I got over there, but while I was going over there, he wanted me stopped because of my certified medical technician. And this is that one thing that I recognized that I could tell you about a little bit too, relative to what happened, was because I was a certified medical technician, and there was a big problem at that time going on with the 6th Army Area Medical Headquarters. And they needed a lot of help with that, because I had the non-combat rating, because I was a certified medical technician. Then they immediately brought me back to the Bay Area. And in this document right here that I looked up just here recently, because I had to help with this. During the 1960s and 70s, the World War II wooden army hospital buildings were occupied by the 6th U.S. Army, and that's what I was in, was the 6th U.S. Army medical laboratory. This medical laboratory was the reference laboratory for all medical facilities in the 6th Army areas. And with Vietnam, this is where all these problems came up, because they were finding a lot of infections as well as injuries and everything else. I'm not a surgeon, so I can't. One of the guys that I did have to help lost this leg and this arm, and it was, but I'm not a surgeon, but I had to help with some of these things, and even a lot of the other things that were just more simple accidents. But the infections, this is why I had to help with the infections that they got. Based on this, what it says, what I just started to read, the 6th Army area, excluding Class II facilities, such as the Letterman General Hospital, which is where I spent a lot of time helping at the Letterman General Hospital. The 6th Army Medical Laboratory also performed testing for rabies, all virology tests, and virology research. So this is what I was leading on. And one of the things I developed when I was there, you can see a little bit of here, right here it says tuberculosis. Because back then it took us weeks and weeks to determine if somebody had tuberculosis from some of these other situations that were going on in the hospital. And I was able to develop a new method so that we could detect tuberculosis in just a matter of days instead of weeks. So that's one of the things that I worked on, and this is why I want to say that this whole experience was an incredible blessing for me, and I'm so thankful for having had the opportunity to go over there, then turn around and just be right back. And so this is why I'm not ranked as being a veteran of a foreign war, even though I had to help all of the people that had been not all the people, but a vast majority of all the people. Just talking to a guy out here right now, and he was flying planes and got hurt 5 times. And I asked him, okay, when you did this, how did they, because they flew him back from Vietnam, because we were receiving them in the Bay Area, but they flew him back, and it was 2 years before I was in there and started fixing all of this problem. And what happened was they took him from Vietnam to someplace in Japan, and then to Hawaii, and then to the Letterman General Hospital just before I got there. But because of this, what I just read, the Letterman General Hospital wasn't up to speed where they wanted it to be. Then they took him to Colorado. But this is why I wind up helping with all of this work, and this is why it was such a blessing for me, because I had already got my degree in microbiology and was a certified medical technician, and so I had to go to these 2 places. Back then it was even the Presidio in San Francisco, and across there, which is where the laboratory was, where we were doing all of this, where I had to set up all of this testing, and I had to help I can't say all, but tons of doctors. I can't say how many. It was way over 20, I know that. Because when this situation now, because I wasn't a surgeon or any of that kind of thing to fix an injury, just to stitch things up or something like that. But when it got an infection due to something going on, then I had to do all of the diagnostic kind of stuff. The doctor said, now how do I fix this? How do I treat this? Because the doctors at that point had no comprehension about how to fix this particular infection. So then I did all the diagnostic work, and that's why this is talking about even for the virology things and so on, to determine what can we inject him with. Because just a funny story about this too, a simple thing, because a lot of times everybody said, okay, he's got an infection, let's just give him a shot of penicillin. Well, if you have any comprehension about that, you know, I'll just tell you another funny story. My daughter, when she was little, this was way after I got out of the military, but she sat down, she fell down, sat on a nail when she was 2 years old or something like that. She's still wearing a diaper, and she had a dirty diaper. And when we took her to the emergency room, the doctor then, he was a young guy, And because of this, he said, okay, I'm going to give her this treatment, inject this stuff. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, because she's been potentially contaminated with E. coli. That particular drug that you're talking about promotes the growth of E. coli. He said, oh, I'm sorry. Then he went and got his supervisor and said, which one should I be giving? Because I had already told him what he should be giving. And when his boss came, he said, yeah, Jerry's absolutely correct. You need to be giving this one, not that one.
So you were on the cutting edge of
yes.
a lot of these antibiotic therapy.
Yes, and helping with so many of these guys that were coming back from Vietnam, because they did get to the point where, at that point, where they were flying them directly from someplace over there. I don't know exactly the location now. It's been 50 years ago. I can't remember. To the Bay Area for their treatment. Now, there was a lot of it going on over there where maybe if they just had a bullet hole, then the nurses or people like that could help them over there. But if it went to the point where it was getting more serious, then we had to work more serious. And that's why I helped the doctors all the time, even because sometimes they would send me the sample, I would do the analysis, and then they would treat them even while they were still over there.
So Jerry, you spent some time in Vietnam, but then came back, spent
just
the rest of the time.
Moments. I think I was only there for 1 or 2 nights is all. Because,
tell us about the PTSD work you've
well,
been doing.
Thank you for bringing that back up, because this is one of the things that, as a result of that experience, and now I am one of the major contributors to all of the FDA regulations, the technical regulations. I've helped them come up with everything. I also helped them come up with what's called QCID, Quality Systems Inspector. I said that wrong. QSIT, Quality Systems Inspector Training. So they know what to look for when they're going to all these pharmaceutical companies and so on. And as a result of what I had though in basic training, I learned a lot, because now as a result of all of this, I'm doing a course and trying to get it going. I did it in Rock Springs, and the guy there changed it, because when I did it, was doing it all over the rest of the United States. It's called the Biochemistry of Stress Relief, Irritation Control, and Inner Vibrations. And so that whole course is part of this PTSD thing, because when I was in the military, now, and this is why I started this whole course, was because I had this problem too. I mean, I was running, after I got done, I was out of the military at this time, but I'm doing half marathons, and I was still doing my 5 miles every day. And this is what so many people think, well, aerobics is so good, but I've invented this phrase called aerobic meditation. And this is why I want to get to this story. It's a little bit longer, getting to it immediately, because when we meditate, that's wonderful. And of course, that's why churches do hymns, and why they do prayers, is so that we get in the right mindset instead of worrying about what's going on right now. But when we meditate, now what am I going to do? You know, you immediately can switch back. And that's what I've worked on relative to PTSD, because it is so stress, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. Because now when I was in basic training, I learned one of the best lessons of my life. I don't know if I can stand up and show that, but what it is, when we were doing this, now I've forgotten the actual word. We sang these when we were jogging all the time.
Oh, cadence? Do your cadence?
Cadence, yes, the cadence. And there was bunches of them. But now, when I was talking about my marathons and everything, I was the vice president of operations for a company in Florida called Hemocure. And every morning I was jogging, but because the CEO was causing a problem, and he ultimately bankrupted it, and we all got laid off. But while I was doing my 5 miles every morning, I was saying, I wonder what he's doing, what he's doing. So I had this negative kind of stuff going on up here. And later I learned, okay, so just because I'm jogging and doing these aerobic things, even if I'm swimming or playing golf or any of those kind of things, there's no positive benefit out of that. I mean, it's good for the body, but not good for the brain necessarily. So when I was in the military, though, I learned a wonderful thing in basic training. Because all the time we were drawing, we said that, say that word again?
Cadence?
Singing those cadence songs. I want to be an airborne ranger. I want to live the life of danger. Up the hill, over the hill, down the hill, down the hill. I cannot even do it now without getting tears because it's so special that it brings you to such a positive thing. And I was so glad that I learned that in my basic, because we were, instead of, why have I been drafted? Why am I here? I hope I never have to go to Vietnam. But I want to be an air. So all the time we were doing those things, we got such positive things. And that's what I've been able to add now, because with all my biochemistry, I've learned how do I generate the best biochemicals instead of just doing the aerobic activity. So I got to do something to generate that. And that's why it's the biochemistry of stress relief, irritation control, and inner vibrations. And one of my best things on irritation was because we learned that more from our parents than we do from anything else. I was babysitting a dog for this couple, and it was one of these situations where it had, let's just say, bad breath. And every time it jumped up on the bed and tried to do something, they knocked it off the bed. And this was one of my first ones where I said, oh, I've got to worry about irritation, because that's a decision. That's just decision. And when that dog jumped up, started licking me, what was this? He was saying, I love you. I thank you so much. I appreciate you. Well, it did have a strong odor, but then I said, okay, I'm not going to react to that. I'm just going to say, oh, thank you for giving me this. That's just an example of how I talk about irritation control as opposed to any of those biochemicals, because it's a decision you make, about why is this irritating me? Why am I letting this bother me? Oh, I don't need to let this bother me. I can't do anything about this. So that's why, and this is where I've even got to the point where I've invented this phrase called aerobic meditation instead of just quiet meditation. When I did this in Rock Springs, this guy said, because I asked the question, have any of you been doing meditation? This guy was right on the front row. He raised his hand. He said, yeah, I'm meditating probably 15 minutes every morning and every evening before I go to sleep. And I said, okay, so it's just quiet meditation. Yeah, he says, there's a lot of times when I do just what you exampled. Okay, now I got to get going because I got to get this done. And so then we did this thing that I have invented called aerobic meditation. And what I did was make sure that we're doing something instead of this whole body just being totally still, because even computers have generated this situation now. All the time I'm sitting there doing all this, these guys are saying, what do you need me for? I'm not getting what we used to do when we were, get up every morning and go do all the things we needed to do physically. But we did this aerobic meditation for him with this song that I did and talked about it when we got done, because he had this quiet thing, but he's had some motion and things. He said, that's probably the best meditation I've ever done in my life, because of that positive things and generating more of those positive biochemicals and getting him into that situation, just like that military songs that I want to be in, instead of just being quiet. And so, but that's why I was able to generate all of this PTSD stuff, because when I end this, and this is what's been proven all over now, there's a whole lot of evidence about this. How do we block dementia, Alzheimer's, and also PTSD? Because PTSD, in the military, in the United States, we are the boiling pot of the world. But all the other cultures around the world, they all have cultural music and cultural dance. So whenever anybody's really stressful, what do? I mean, even here in this close to this area, but here, the Native American, what did they do? They were always dancing, and when they wanted it to rain, what did they do? put a hand on each other, went around the fire and danced and did these kinds of things to get that kind of mode. But then back in the, this is why I brought this up. Why did rock and roll get started in the United States after the big band era and all these other things? Because, and after World War II, we had so much PTSD here that was causing all of this problem because of the lack of the culture stuff that everybody had in France, all over Europe and stuff like that was helping in this World War II thing so much. And they were doing, that's what was proven, they were doing their cultural things very well and blocking that. And this is where it's really fun. It's the only one I use. It's probably not the only one, but this is where rock and roll got started so well, because Johnny Cash, just as my example, came out with this song, if you get the blues, get rhythm. And then back in the 60s, so that was the song he sang. When you get the blues, get rhythm. So if you're feeling stressed, get rhythm. And that's why inner vibrations is so important. I've had to teach deaf people how to dance, even though they're deaf, but to pick up the vibration, to feel this, we had to make sure they were barefooted, and we couldn't do it on a concrete floor or anything like that. We had to do it on wooden floor so that they could feel the vibration. That's why vibration is so important too. But this is what comes up to a lot of that stress thing, because here in the military, what happens when I play a thing, and it happened to me today. I was walking by that map upstairs, and there was a guy sitting there, and all of a sudden it was like an explosion. It went bam, and everybody in there did this something really, oh my gosh, because that's what we get in our lipid area up here. And this is something that through Scientology we also proved. Even when mom is very pregnant, and if she has a very stressful situation, like gets slugged and some guy says something horrible to her, or she falls down the stairs and jumps up and says some word, then that child, that goes into the brain, and it stays in there for at least 5 to 8 years every time they hear that, because that child got so much stress at that exact moment. And so whenever they hear that, they're really scared. And that is the same thing as PTSD, because over there, just what I gave an example, when that thing went off up there, everybody gets in a panic, even when, well, one of my examples is, how do we react to things when we hear things or even feel them? If something exploded right now, what would we both do? Oh, I better get over here or something, So you react to that kind of stuff, which is okay. I'm not saying it's a problem. But it's just important to know, this is what I used in my course, and a lot of the people said, oh, if I say to you, just joking a little bit, because all music has to have better vibration, and that's why, it started in Africa, and I don't remember how many thousand years ago it was. They started beating on a hollow tree just to start this bass kind of stuff, to give that vibration to where you started feeling kinds of things. But even now, if I just say to you, wow, what's your reaction? As opposed to, wow, wow. It's a totally different feeling. Your body is reacting different ways. I'm just using that as an example, funny example. But this is why I got going so much on PTSD, because the best treatment for PTSD, yeah, you can get help. Doctors want to help you, give you shots of different kinds of things, but you can do it yourself by saying, okay, I'm going to do this and this, which you've got to generate those positive biochemicals. Now, just quickly, do you know anything about dopamine and oxytocin? Okay, when we're in the fight and flight mode, as soon as we get in the fight and flight mode, when you and I are getting in that, the body, these negative biochemicals, but as soon as you, hey, have a genuine smile, these muscles generate that dopamine, which goes directly here and then blocks that, and immediately you get out of that fight and flight mode. You've probably all experienced this in having that experience, because it immediately stops this thing from doing that when you do this. And then when I'm holding your hand, or just, I can't do it in this thing, but a lot of times if I walk up and I touch your arm, what are you doing? What's your reaction? As opposed to, oh, you're so beautiful, I'm so happy to see you in this situation. Now, that's another thing that generates those positive biochemicals, and that's what these PTS guys need to learn to do, is to say, what am I going to do to generate this, and to stay out of this other situation that we know now, just like I told you about that baby. Now, when I'm in a situation, well, when you had a car wreck, and it was a horrible car wreck, and then just before you had this thing, you heard some tires screeching. Just before that happened, you heard that screeching, and then all of a sudden you had that horrible experience. Now, today, if we just played that music, right, and if we just, something right over here just went like that, your body, oh my gosh. And that's what we have to work on, is to say, oh, and that's why these kids, we've proven it with the 5-year-olds or the 8-year-olds, after a while, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have to get so excited about that right now. And when I get that situation, the same situation from a bomb going off or a skid mark or anything of that, it's planted up here in the lipid part of your brain. Once you got it, you know it's up there. Okay, now I got to figure out how to get rid of it. I can't give you a shot to get rid of it, but your consciousness does, and that's where all of this PTSD stuff also works, to help you with that kind of stuff, to get those positive biochemicals circulating. Now, if you just do this, if we just do it momentarily, just like I said, it lasts for just a short period of time. But through my course, we do it in a different way, which is basically what also Johnny Cash was saying. When you get the blues, get rhythm. If you keep the rhythm up for a period of time, they continue to circulate now for approximately 2.5 hours. So now you're almost curing it very quickly and helping that lipid problem, this problem in the brain that's keeping that memory that you're not thinking about. So that's why you asked the question about PTSD, but this is again why I'm so blessed and so thankful for what happened as a result of getting drafted and going through this and learning this experience of when I'm just in an irritating mode, now I have to say, oh, I need to get out of this. This is why am I letting this bother me? Why? Yeah, it does not smell good, but at the same time, why do I have to be doing something like this instead of just saying, well, I know you love me. Okay, if I'm going to really worry about this, well, then I guess I need to just treat you and take care of that, or I'm not going to worry about it. I never learned to drink coffee because as a child, my granddad, my mom was cooking for my grandpa, making coffee for him, and every time he was filling it up, then because it was really hot, he couldn't stand to drink it out of there so much, but he was always just pouring a little bit of it into the plate and making a terrible noise. And it was really irritating for me, and it was just brought up a negative thing for me, and I thought, oh gosh. Now as an adult, I understand that that was a problem that I could do. And that's why I've learned all of this stuff to help with the biochemistry of stress relief, as well as mentally dealing with irritation control, and then figuring out how we deal with these inner vibrations. And that's what that baby went through when he got hurt inside you, or when all of this group out here, when I was sitting next to something or flying a plane or whatever, and I heard this thing go down, I get that sound, that vibration that happened at that time causes tremendous amount of issues. And that's,
you have had some incredible life experiences and stories.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I appreciate that.
Question about this weekend. What do you think about what's going on, this reunion?
Well, one of the primary reasons I came was because a few weeks ago, it's not the primary reason, but it was a high reason, is a few weeks ago we had the same kind of somewhat of the celebration, which was the welcome home in Pinedale, Wyoming. And the governor was there, and when he talked and everything, but while he was there, because I am the local chaplain for the American Legion, I had to help with all the flags and so on and so forth, but I met the governor there, and we had a wonderful conversation. I thought, I want to see him again when I get here, and I did. We had a wonderful conversation again, so this was really special to be able to have this reunion, if I can use that phrase, because he's a special guy, and we had a lot of fun conversations before. When I was in North Carolina, a guy said, well, if they're wearing cowboy boots, they're not leaders. And he was wearing cowboy boots when we were there in Pinedale, and so we laughed about I talked about that whole thing, and we laughed about it and so on. So that's why I wanted to shake hands with him again and be here for this one. And so that was one of the special things. And I do really appreciate the fact that, because I also was in what he described a lot. When I got back, and one of the first times I was in San Francisco, actually they made me walk about 3 miles to where I had to go to Fort Baker. It was a long ways from the highway all the way down to Fort Baker. It wouldn't be 3 miles, but it was a long ways. But one of the things that he talked about was how negative all of the military was treated at that period of time, because unfortunately they were killing babies, and babies were dying. They weren't pulling them. And another very good friend of mine, when he walked around the corner, it was in the jungle, walked around a spot, he walked around and he saw this person standing about where you are, was aiming at him right there, and he was looking right down the barrel. And what happened was, when the guy pulled the trigger, it went click. And then he was able to bring up his M16 and take care of him. And so, but he told me all the time he was so blessed. He said, I know God was watching out for me. And he said, I also feel like because he tried to kill me, I had the right to take care of him. And he did do that. But this is what happened to me, because everybody was kind of hated because of the general population, even the hippies and everything. We couldn't wear long hair or anything back then. But when I walked around in San Francisco in my uniform, I did get spit on several times, and people were banning me from even going into a restaurant. You can't eat here. You can't come in here. And so then when I was moving between the Fort Baker, which was the 6th Army Area Medical Headquarters that this was talking about, fixing all of this stuff to be able to do all this analytical stuff, when I had to go from there across the Golden Gate Bridge to Letterman General Hospital and stuff, then, because we did get to the point now where instead of using the regular military uniform, we just had white clothes on so that we wouldn't be treated like that. So that's one of the blessings that I really appreciate, is being here with the governor. And I also, I do wish they would have announced more that, okay, for Wyoming, we're going to have this many people from, I wish they'd have said Green River. But one of my good friends in high school, who was also in the military, then he graduated just 2 years ahead of me, but he was big time over there. His name was Hank. Well, his name is Henry, but we called him Hank Castilian, and he was the mayor of Green River, and he and I are good friends. And so now he and I got to spend a lot of time together today.